I have today with us Catherine Keller. Catherine Keller is the George T. Cobb Professor of Constructive Theology at Drew University Theological School. She's authored and co-edited several books. The most recent is Cloud of the Impossible, Negative Theology and Planetary Entanglement. That sounds like a very intriguing topic. And Catherine has contributed to the book here. Yeah. And Catherine has contributed to the book here for Our Common Home. And we're interviewing people today who have been contributing to that book. Thank you so much for being with us and taking this time. I thought one of the most intriguing things that you said in your contribution was that the climate catastrophe creeps along slowly and imperceptibly enough that we fail to react as we would to a dramatic loss. And when I read that, it made me think of sometimes the list of irrational things that we do. You know, people say, for example, that we will respond much more quickly, much more dramatically to a plane crash, and people will be afraid to fly when there's a lot more opportunity to have a fatal accident on the highways. And it's that kind of dramatic, quick event that captures us, isn't it?
It's a good analogy. Yeah. Let me just think with you about that. I'm glad you bring up this question of the temporality of climate change, because it is moving along in geological time, and we live in human existential social story time. Of course, it's moving along in extremely and alarmingly rapid geological time, and we keep hearing that it is moving perhaps much faster than we thought. I mean, the New York Times just had a headline a couple of days ago about how the West Antarctic ice sheet seems to be melting much more rapidly than had been understood, perhaps twice as rapidly, so that business as usual will bring us to utter disaster for children born now. That is, by the end of the century, we'll have the sea rise of somewhere between 3 and 6 feet, which wipes out the cities. Anyway, we have these facts that we're hearing when we tune into them, and there's some speed that's terrifying if you enter into the mindset of climate science or just of planetary life. And a lot of people get it when they're thinking about it. But you're right, the immediate urgencies, the plane crashes, the episode of terror in Europe, or of course, an election in the United States, utterly preoccupies us. And it's not that we should ignore these immediate urgencies in our shared life and in our personal life. It's that the danger, the difficulty here is that constantly, even among people who are not climate deniers, climate change is put on the back burner.
Particularly apropos when politicians and economists have more short-term and visible goals to try to react to and persuade people.
And it does seem that democracy is on short-term time loops geared to the next election cycle, and that there's no simple way to step outside of that temporality. And our economic system is geared to the extreme short term of the next sale, the next deal, the next profit margin. So it's very challenging to enter into this slow, fast time of climate change and to strategize together about how to tell the stories better, so that people do get more continuously gripped, short of just waiting for another Sandy, another great emergency that then does raise the question with that sense of immediate urgency.
You said also that we are in need of a narrative that unifies us as a people if we're to respond collectively. Do you see the encyclical as providing that type of thing, or what does a universal narrative, look like for you?
Well, I do think it's crucial for us to find narratives. I probably mean that in the plural, but narratives that do hold us collectively together, as what the Pope is constantly now calling the human family. And I think that family is a very extended family. It extends into all the creatures of our world. If family means, the ones you're related to. So what kind of stories can we tell? They have to be different stories in different communities that will hold us together, not in a homogenized unity,
Mhm.
but in coalitional uh, collectives, in a sense of a shared planetary public. I do think the encyclical is a huge contribution to that task and that need, and that the gathering motif of the cry of the poor, the cry of the earth, works to really call to a huge public. So it's a great example. Obviously, there need to be many other such stories emerging and new forms of it. One hopes that the genius of Hollywood will kick in with some stories that aren't just pure apocalypse about about the climate, for instance, and that all of our different religious traditions can find ways of building this kind of effectual narrative about what kind of human family are we? What is our responsibility one to another, and therefore to ourselves? Do we care about our future?
Mhm.
Do we really care about life at the end of this century? Um, I suppose people with children, are more naturally prone to, but a lot of real family folk are among the worst climate deniers. So even having a whole set of children who are going to have children doesn't guarantee that live interest in the shared future. So I think we've got an immense challenge that is scaled to the immense problem that we face. But this is why perhaps imaginative media, forms of art and music, other kinds of storytelling, and certainly mobilizations that are multi-religious, interreligious, infra-religious, uh, will be crucial now.
We respond to stories, don't we? The human family really responds to stories that
Yeah.
spark our imagination. I like the idea of family because I think one of the biggest problems we face is really a tribalism where people tend to be so easily pitted against one another.
Mhm.
So to get the language of family uh,
Mhm.
into the conversation is important.
It is, and it's family used against the tribalized sense of family.
Yeah,
It's the human family versus the the the, the narrow focus on the nuclear family, the heteronormative family, right? All kinds of families, as Jesus considered his family to be his community, had nothing to do with the bloodline for
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think family stories of a whole new kind are needed. Yes.
Could you expound on Gaia for those for whom that might not be a familiar term?
Yes, right. I mean, Gaia is an ancient Greek term just meaning earth, and there are uh, there are very poignant myths from ancient Greece about Gaia as one of the earliest deities, bringing forth generations of Earth's uh, creatures. Uh, but then, very strangely, there's a big conflict with the Olympian gods and the children of Gaia, the Pergamon exhibit that's now in Berlin, that comes from Turkey, actually, ancient Turkey of 2,500 years ago, shows this. It's an image of Gaia uh, coming up from the earth, utterly in grief, like a Pieta, because her beautiful son is about to be killed by the goddess Athena. And the son is one of these children of the earth. And it's an image celebrating the victory of, of the Athenians over the barbarians, as they were being called, who were identified with the earth. So that's an ancient resonance of this war of civilization against the earth. But the scientists Lovelock and Margulis developed the Gaia hypothesis in the 1980s. That was quite heretical for science at the time, but is having to be taken much more seriously now. And it's looking at the earth not as a goddess, not as a person, not as one being, but looking at it's a metaphor for a complex homeostatic system. That's a less groovy term than Gaia. A metaphor for a complex system in which the parts are delicately intertwined, interconnected. And so a lot of ecological thinkers are picking up on that image, because it has some metaphorical story power. Yeah. In my new book, I have a whole chapter that goes in and through that ancient story of Gaia as a parable for this ongoing war of civilization against the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you feel that there is, if we were to take away one idea from this conversation, or one idea as it relates to the issue of our climate, what would your one idea that you would like for us to leave would be?
The one idea I would like for us to take from the discussion of the encyclical would not need to be the cry of the poor, the cry of the earth, because other people are going to say that, and that's clear. So the one idea I want to remind us of is the sentence that is put in bold just after the end of the second paragraph of the encyclical. And it's this, that nothing in this world is indifferent to us. Nothing in this world is indifferent to us. So without naming it, the Pope really is evoking something very Gaia-like, something like the earth as full of life, as its own kind of organism in which all of the creatures are alive and somehow responsive to each other, organic, even inorganic, but that we are really relatives of one another and interdependent. And so that it's a tragic flaw in the development of human civilization that we haven't yet come to terms with that we still play a zero-sum game with the rest of our Earth family. The Pope is pitting this sense of nothing being indifferent to us against what he calls the globalization of indifference through the kind of economic growth system and its use of powerful technologies that are utterly indifferent to the suffering of the vulnerable populations of the earth, human and non-human. So that's what I think I want us to meditate on, that nothing in this world is indifferent to us. We matter, and we matter to all of it, and it matters to us. We are materially in this together, for good and ill.
Beautiful. I think it's the perfect place for us to close this interview. Thank you so much for those words.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing, Pat. Marvelous.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.